Welcome to Science Easy Tech channel. In this video, we are going to discuss about methods of psychology. So this is from Unit 1, Introduction to Psychology in Nursing. This is my Part 6 video. Already I have posted from Part 1 to Part 5 videos. If you have not watched those videos, I have given the link in description box, suggested end card and iCard also. This video is useful for BSc Nursing students, post-basic BSc Nursing students as well as students who are studying B.Ed and General Psychology. Before moving on to the topic, if you are new to Science Easy Tech channel, just take a moment to subscribe our channel and also to press the notification bell icon in order to get connected with our latest updates. So this part 6 video is my last video in Introduction Unit 1. So the content what we are going to discuss in this video is methods of psychology. Let's move on to the topic. Methods of psychology. So what is psychology? Psychology is the scientific study of human behavior. Psychology is the scientific study of human behavior. So we require various special tools and procedures for understanding the behavior of human beings. So we require so many special tools as well as procedures for understanding the human behavior. These special procedures or tools are referred to as methods. These special procedures or tools are referred to as methods of psychology, which are widely used in studying the or understanding the human behavior. So let us see what are all the various methods of psychology. So the various methods of psychology are introspection or self-observation method, observational method, experimental method, clinical or case history method, survey method, and genetic or developmental method. So what are all the various methods of psychology? Introspection or self-observation method, observation method, experimental method, clinical or case history method, survey method, and genetic or developmental method. So there are 6 methods in psychology. How you can remember? You can remember the mnemonic GIS CEO. So now we are telling Google CEO, Microsoft CEO and CEO for companies and all like that. So you can keep it as CEO and GIS, GIS. So what is this? G stands for genetic or developmental method. What is this? I stands for introspection or self-observation method. What is this? S stands for survey method. What is C stands for clinical or case history method. What is this? E stands for experimental method. What is this? O stands for observational method. So 6. So if you are going to memorize this acronym with the methods, it is easy so that you will not forget in your exam. Sometimes only 5 will come into your mind and you will keep on thinking what is the next, and the 6th one will not come into your mind. So if you are going to learn like this in an acronym format, so these are some of the tips for learning and keeping it in memory. Okay, so with this acronym easily you can remember the methods of psychology. So let's see the detailed explanation of each and every method. So what is this introspection or self-observation method? This introspection method is known as looking into one's own self. That is, you are looking within your own self. So you are analyzing your own self. So what you have to ask the patient? You have to ask the patient to look into his or her own self and how he perceives, what is his inner feelings, what is his inner experiences, everything from the patient or subject point of view you are asking them to ventilate. So it is nothing but what it is, a self observation method where the patient or the subject is made to analyze or understand his or her own inner feelings and experiences. So they have to report the same feelings to the other person so that the other person will interpret it. For example, a patient after an operation, you can ask the patient how he is feeling so that the patient can tell his experiences in the operation and in the post-operative stage also, whether he is feeling anxious, whether fear is there, or whether he can able to cope up, how he is feeling, his own inner feelings. So intro means looking within, to look within or inside. So if you are going to understand the patient feelings better, if the patient is going to understand, if the patient is going to ventilate his or her own feelings, everything, so that it helps you in planning the treatment and also to give a better treatment for the client. So what are the merits and demerits of introspection method? This introspection method is the very basic method or fundamental method of psychology. So observation and experiments are based upon introspection. So it is a very basic method, and what are all the observations and experiments what you are going to perform also is going to based on the expression of inner feelings of the person by him self or herself. Okay, so introspection gives us direct, immediate, certain and exact knowledge of our own mental processes. So we can understand what is our own mental processes and which is going to have a greater impact on your behavior. So your behavior, how you think, how you act, everything is depends on your inner mental processes. So it enables us to fully understand the behavior of an individual, so on his own aspect. For example, a person, a calm going person, suddenly he has burst up on one fine day. So when you are asking what is the reason for his burst up, means the person will be telling so, okay, what has made him to behave in such a way, so what is the reason for that behavior, everything he will be ventilating it. Okay, so we cannot confine ourselves to mere objectives and direct observation of a person. So we want to understand the behavior of the person. Simply the person is behaving means what is the reason for that behavior, we have to understand. So for that purpose, this introspection method is going to serve very beautifully. So this method is also inexpensive, and like experimental method and all needs a laboratory in a controlled setting. But for this thing you don't want any laboratory or anything. So it is also inexpensive. Just you are going to talk to the patient and you are going to ask him on his point of view to express his own or her feelings. Next, what are all the demerits of this introspection method? This method is not applicable in children. Children may not be able to tell exactly, or it is not able to be possible in animals or also in mentally retarded individuals. Only person who is having good mental health or sound mental health, you can do introspection method. But for children or mentally retarded people or animals, they cannot introspect properly, so you cannot use this method, and it is purely private affair and cannot be verified by others. So only what the person or what the subject tells only you are taking into consideration. So the observer may not be whatever they are telling, based on that you are interpreting the results, but you cannot interfere with other person's feelings or perception. So it is purely private affair. Next, in many cases the patient may not have insight to know. So many times the person may not know whether they are having some problem or not. That is insight, whether the person is aware of that he is suffering from some problems or anything. Many times they may not understand or they may not have an idea that they are suffering with some problem. Okay, so that insight is absent in many mentally ill patients. Introspection sometimes involves attention to a mental processes. So many times you have to sometimes this introspection you have to give much more attention to various mental processes which are involved. For example, perception, which are involved in the activities. Sometimes it is impossible for us to have total attention towards the mental processes of an individual. So these are all some of the demerits of introspection method. So you have both the positive side and negative side of anything in life. Like that, for this methods of psychology also you have both demerits and merits. Next, moving on to observational method. Observation means here an individual observes the other person's behavior. So it consists of perception of an individual behavior under natural conditions by other persons. So observation means some others are observing the patient or subject. So suppose a teacher is observing the student when she is taking care of a patient. Okay, so here, for example, in the hospital, the nurse makes an observation about your patient's temperature, pulse, blood pressure, patient's feelings, facial expressions. Suppose if the patient is restless or anxious, so many things the nurse is observing. Why the nurse is observing? Yes, in order to understand the patient's condition and to give a proper care to the patient. So why the other person, suppose if the patient tomorrow he is going for a surgery, so he is very nervous, his anxiety, his BP is shooting up. So you can understand what is the when you are observing, you can see that the BP fluctuates to high, and you can ask, and you can find out that because of anxiousness, fear due to surgery, the patient is having all these facial expressions or the. So you can counsel the patient based on your observation. Next is steps in observational method. First, you have to observe the behavior of the subject or patient. Then you have to note it down, note the behavior, then interpret it and analysis of behavior. Then finally you can do generalization of the behavior. So you have observed a nurse working in a preoperative ward has observed that many patients before going to surgery they are anxious. So she has noted down this behavior in the case sheet and interpretation and analysis of behavior. Why? Because due to preoperative fear only the patient is having so much restlessness as well as his or her BP shooting up. Then so that you can have an idea that because of this preoperative fear, many patients are having a shoot up of BP before going to surgery. So which you have to take into consideration, and you have to take measures to control the blood pressure. Next, moving on to merits. So it is also economical, natural as well as flexible. You can, according to your convenience, you can observe the individual like that. So it is very economical, not much money consuming or like that, and it can take place in a natural setting. Suppose if you want to observe the patient, the student nurse taking care of a patient in a hospital, you can go in that hospital setup and you can take care of the patient. So the data which is studied through observation can be analyzed, measured, classified and interpreted. So observation is one method of data collection in research also. So whatever the data you have collected by means of observation, you can analyze it, you can undergo statistical calculation and you can interpret the findings, and the results can also be verified, and if necessary you want you can be modify it, and it is very reliable. The observation method, the results are can be verified, and it is also reliable or consistent. Next, observation method is quite suitable for observing developmental characteristics like children's habits and interests. So if a child is more interested in drawing, painting, so you know that the child is very much interested in these activities, you can make the child to have regular painting classes like that. Or if the child is interested in a dance, so if the child is having interest in music, so you can focus on the child to take up these areas in order to shine in these areas. So observation method is very useful in understanding the developmental characteristics of children. For example, the effect of absence of mother or father or both on the child development can be determined properly through observing the development of such deprived children. So for a child, both father and mother are important. If both of them are not there, if only one single parent is there, like that and all, so the deprived children's their development you can observe, and what influences the absence of parents is going to have on the development of child, you can observe and you can study it. So this is with regard to merits. Then moving on to demerits, there are chances of subjective report and also prejudices of observer may creep in. Okay, so here the other person is observing, so the observer's prejudice or misconceptions or perceptions is going to have bias, is going to have an interference with the observation method. So this is where one of the major demerit, that is observers prejudices or observers bias is going to play a very vital role in observation method. For example, a teacher doesn't like one student personally. For example, it should not be like that. All teachers, a good teacher should be impartial. But sometimes a teacher doesn't like one student. Whatever the student is doing good also, she is not going to appreciate that student because prejudicially she is having that this student is not good. So whatever good she is doing also, this teacher's mind will be in such a way that she will not appreciate the student. So like that, these are all examples for prejudices. Okay, sometimes to observe the natural behavior of the observer, you have to spend more time, energy and money also. I told it is least expensive. For some observations, you have to spend more time, money, energy. Then it lacks repeatability as each natural situation can occur only once. So sometimes you are taking place in a natural setting. So sometimes you may not be able to observe the same thing what you have seen previously. So repeatability, it lacks repeatability. Okay, so not being able to establish a proper cause and effect relationship. So you don't know what is the reason for the behavior, because only in experimental study you can understand the cause and effect relationship, but not in observational method. It may or may not be. So exact cause effect relationship you may not be able to elicit by means of this observational method. Next, moving on to experimental method. So in experimental method, you have, it is considered as the most important scientific method. So the word experiment comes from the Latin word meaning to try or put to test. So you are testing something or you are trying to find out something. What you are trying to find out? Yes, you are trying to find out the cause and effect relationship. Only the cause and effect relationship can be studied better only by means of experimental method and not by means of any other methods. So to study scientifically, if you want to analyze and study the human behavior, means the only effective method which is available is your experimental method. So in psychology, experimental method is used to study the cause and effect relationship. So here psychology is used to study the effect of cause and relationship to understand the nature of human behavior. That is, suppose what is the effect of anxiety on human behavior? What is the effect of fear on human behavior? Okay, what is the effect of happiness on human behavior? So from these observations you can draw certain conclusions which leads to the formation of various theories or principles can be established by means of experimental method. Why you are doing so many researches, not only in psychology, in all the fields you are doing research by means of experimental method. So after conducting research you can add on to the body of knowledge of your theory subjects, and also to have evidence based practice. You can derive so many theories. Most of the learning theories and motivational theories have come from the basis of these experimental studies which have been done in some laboratories under some controlled settings. So let's see what are all the essential features of experimental method. It requires one person, minimum two persons, one experimenter and the subject. Okay, and the subject or the person on whom the experiment is going to be conducted, or the person whose behavior is to be observed. So experimentation should be done on all living organisms. All experiments should be done under a controlled condition or a laboratory or a hospital setting. So the setting should be what? A controlled environmental condition. So what are all the steps in experimentation? So you have so many steps in experimentation. The first step is stating the problem. Second step, formulation of hypothesis. Third step, to find out independent and dependent variables. Fourth step, arranging the environment. And fifth step, analyzing the results. And the last step is testing of the hypothesis by the result of experiment. So let's see one by one. So stating the problem for any experiment or any research like that, whatever you want to do, first you have to identify the problem and state the problem. Okay, so this is the first and foremost step. For example, if you want to study the effects of smoking on physical and mental health, what is the effect of the habit smoking on physical health as well as mental health of students? Next, formulation of hypothesis. What is this hypothesis? So you have to, once the problem has been stated, you have to formulate a tentative statement in which direction you want to test the hypothesis. So hypothesis is a tentative answer to the problem. For example, for the above example what I have discussed, yes, so the effects of smoking on physical and mental health. So the hypothesis can be formulated in such a way: smoking is harmful to physical and mental health of students. Smoking is harmful to physical and mental health. So you are thinking that smoking is harmful to physical and mental health of students. So you have to test this hypothesis whether smoking is harmful to physical or mental health, or smoking is not harmful to physical or mental health. So your hypothesis, your assumption is that smoking is harmful to both physical and mental health. So let's see how we can test this hypothesis. The next step is, first you have to find out the independent and dependent variables. Okay, so if you want to find out the cause and effect relationship, first you have to find out which variable is independent and which variable is dependent. For example, smoking will be what? Independent variable. What is the dependent variable? Your health is dependent on the habit smoking. So your health is going to get affected on the habit smoking. So smoking is independent variable. What is dependent variable? Yes, your physical health as well as mental health is your dependent variable. Next is arranging the environment. Whenever you want to do an experiment, you have to do it under a controlled setting. Okay, so for example, physical and mental health of students who are smoking will be observed. So when you are taking the controlled environment, so other factors which are going to interfere with your results, that should be kept constant. So factors other than the independent variable, only smoking you have to take into consideration. So the students who are having only the bad habit of smoking should be taken into consideration. Some students will be having both the bad habit like smoking, alcoholism, or smoking, drug abuse. So that and all you should not take. If you are going to take that and all in your experiment, even that alcoholism is also going to have an effect on physical and mental health. Drug abuse also going to have an effect on your physical and mental health. So what you have to take into consideration, you have to take into consideration only smoking. Okay, only the students who are only smokers are not going to have any other bad habits like alcoholism, tobacco chewing, or drug abuses like that. And so in this way you have to control the environment or independent variables. Next, you have collected everything. So you are analyzing the results. Generally, the subjects of experiment, you have two groups. One group is experimental group. The other group is controlled group. So they can be compared statistically. For example, one group you are having smokers and another group you are having non-smokers. For example, 50 patients in smokers and 50 subjects are non-smokers. So smokers, what are all the health problems they are having with regard to physical and mental health, and non-smokers with regard to physical and mental health, you can compare it. So finally you are testing the hypothesis by the results of the experiment. So the results may prove or disprove the hypothesis. Sometimes you can tell yes, smoking is harmful to physical or mental health. Sometimes the results may predict the smoking is not harmful to physical or mental health. It can be in both way. So whatever the results you are getting, you have to present it as it is. No manipulation should be there. So testing of hypothesis, sometimes your hypothesis may be accepted or sometimes it may be rejected. So let's see a flow chart on the various steps which are going to get involved in experimental method. Flow chart depicting experimental method. So first is you have to state the problem. Next, formulation of hypothesis. Then you have to identify the subjects. That is, in the previous example, you have to identify the students who are having smoking habit. So identify the subjects and randomly assign. Randomly means, suppose in a class some 50 students are there, write their 50 students name in small chits. Okay, this is lottery method. You have so many methods which you will be learning in detail in your nursing research. Okay, so one method I am giving as an example. So all the 50 members have an equal chance to go into the experimental group and control group. So pick 25 slips for experimental group and 25 slips for control group. And so you can write the student who are, you can write 25 slips experimental group and 25 slips as control group. E is for experimental group, C is for control group. So 50 students, you can ask them to pick the lots. So when they are going to pick the lots, students who are getting E can be placed in experimental group and students who are getting C can be placed in control group. Or sometimes you can take 25 students who are smokers in the experimental group and non-smokers you can put it in the control group. 25 students who are non-smoking you can put in the control group. So in this way you can do it. So smoking students you can put in the experimental group or treatment group, and non-smoking students you can put in group 2, that is control group. Then finally you have to measure the dependent variable. What is the dependent variable? Physical and mental health of students. So you can measure it, and finally you can compare your results, okay, between the smoking students and non-smoking students. What the physical health and mental health of smoking and non-smoking students, and finally you have to compare the two groups results. So this is with regard to the flow chart of the experimental and control group experimental method. So next we will see the merits. So it is a scientific method, as I have told. It is the only method to identify the cause and effect relationship. So maximum control of phenomena. So you are controlling the environment, you are controlling the independent variable, everything. So sometimes repetition, you can do it. The same study you can repeat in a different environment with a different subjects like that and all. So it is scientific method. It is only the method to identify the cause and effect relationship. It has maximum control on extraneous variables or independent variables or phenomena. Then repetition is also possible. Demerits. So expiry all problems of psychology, because psychology is human behavior. You cannot do experiments and you can find results. So all problems of psychology cannot be studied by this method. Experimental method is a costly method and time consuming method, and sometimes you require special, the researcher should have special knowledge, skill, then experience, interest in performing the experiments, and sometimes you need laboratories also to perform this experiment. Experimental methods fails to study behavior in a naturalistic setting. So observation method and all you can do in a naturalistic setting, but experimental method only in a controlled setting you can be able to do, either in a laboratory setting like that. It cannot always be used, especially if the experiment might be dangerous to the subjects. So some experiments are very harmful or dangerous to the subjects. The ethical point of view should be kept into consideration, that is ethical or moral principle. So even if you are not doing good for the person is also okay, but you should not harm the person. So sometimes due to ethical considerations, the experimental method can lead to some dangerous effects also. So you have to consider the ethical principles. Next, moving on to clinical or case history method. So this method is used by various clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, psychiatric social worker in child guidance clinics, mental hygiene clinics, or mental health institutions or hospitals, and allied health institutions or allied institutions. So what you are going to study, you are going to study the cause and basis of people's behavior, fear, attitude, personal maladjustments, etc. So a great deal of relevant data is collected by using case history, interview, home visit, and psychological tests. So you can study about the case histories, interviews, home visits, and psychological tests. So this method is used by clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, psychiatric social worker in various child guidance clinics, in allied institutions, health institutions, mental health hospitals, then counseling centers and all. So what is the, you are understanding the cause and basis for human behavior, fear, anxiety, what is what is the reason for maladjustment, everything. So what are all the various methods used in this case history method are case histories, interviews, home visits, and psychological tests. So in all this case history method, interview method, psychological tests, home visits, you can understand the behavior of the individual. Next, in this technique, information is collected from the memory of the individual. Okay, his parents, you can collect from the person itself based on his memory, from his parents or family members, friends, teachers, what are all the available resources and records, reports, etc. So the information mostly it includes the past history of the disease. History collection includes past history of the disease, what are all the treatment they have taken already, and any improvement is there or any deprovement is there, present condition, what may be the exaggerating factors which may prone the patient to have a relapse or recurrence, probable cause, signs, symptoms, etc. Everything you can study in detail with regard to this clinical or case history method. So in this technique, information is collected from the memory of the individual, their parents, family members, friends, teachers, and so on, and also from records and reports. So mainly the past history of the disease, treatment already taken, what is the progress, improvement in condition, or present history or present condition, what may be the probable cause for the condition, what are the clinical manifestations, what the patient is going to get exhibited. Now everything you can study easily. So, what are the merits? Case histories will give the clinician an insight into the cause of the problem and suggest possible solutions. Case studies can be productive source of ideas for further investigation by other methods. So, case history, no, it is the method which is going to give a good idea about the root cause of the problem, and you can find if you are identifying the root cause of the problem, you can get solutions to the problem easily. So case studies can produce can be a productive source of ideas for further investigation. So if you are analyzing, if you are taking a detailed history, so based on that you can analyze the behavior and you can give a very effective treatment or quality care to the patient. Next, demerits. The case history method depends largely on memory of incidents, what the patient or the family members or the parents are going to tell to you. So sometimes the patient, if he is going to give because of poor memory, if he is going to give some wrong interpretation, then it can be observed inaccurately, or sometimes you may not be you may over interpret it. Either you can under interpret it or you can over interpret it. So next, moving on to survey method. In survey method, some problems of psychology may not be studied by other methods or experimental method. So what are all those problems, like opinion, attitude, healthcare needs, etc., can be only studied by survey method. These attitudes, opinions and all you cannot study by means of observation or by means of case study method or by means of experimental method. So this is commonly, the survey method is commonly used in social psychology. So the survey method involves collection of gathering of information from a large number of people. So at a time you can collect information from a large number of people. How you can collect it? By means of questionnaires, inventories, checklists, rating scales and interviews. So what are the methods used in survey method? Data collection method is by means of questionnaires, inventories, checklists, rating scales and interviews. So all these things you will be learning in detail in your research in third year BSc Nursing. Next, moving on to merits and demerits. So merit, a large amount of data can be collected in a shorter time. So I told you can collect a large amount of data within a short period of time. Next, demerits, the behavior cannot be observed directly. Just you are getting the information about opinions or their attitudes, but the behavior you are not observing in this method, which is a major drawback of survey method. So in today's video we have seen various methods of psychology. So a quick recap into the various methods of psychology. GIST CEO is an acronym I told you to keep in mind. So genetic or developmental method, I is for introspection method, S is for survey method, C is for clinical or case history method, E for experimental method and O is for observation method. Hope this video is clear for you all. If you like my video, please give a thumbs up, share and subscribe to Science Easy Tech channel. This video has given an in-depth explanation about the topic methods of psychology. If you still have any doubts, feel free to post your doubts in comment section. As I have told earlier, my previous videos link I have given in description box, suggested end card and iCard, or you can watch our channel playlist BSc Nursing Psychology for more psychology related videos. This completes our first chapter. My next video will be starting with the second chapter, that is biological basis of human behavior. Kindly subscribe to our channel and keep supporting. Thank you friends.